Hello.
Hello.
A very warm welcome to the Parenting Teenagers course, which is designed for parents with children aged 11 to 18.
Scylla and I have been developing and running this course for more than 10 years. It's based on our own experiences, as well as the many tips and ideas we've picked up from parenting experts and from hundreds of other parents.
During the course, you'll be hearing from a number of those experts, ranging from psychologists to counsellors, as well as from teachers and lots of parents and teenagers themselves.
We're really glad you're doing this course, whether you're parenting as a couple or on your own, or you're step-parenting. We have 4 children. Kirsty, our daughter, is the eldest, and then 3 boys, Benj, Barney and Josh. And for 12 years, we had at least one teenager in our house, and for most of that time, several.
Whatever your circumstances and however many children you have, whatever their ages and stages, and whatever issues you're dealing with, we hope you enjoy as well as benefit from this course. One of our aims is to help you make the most of these teenage years.
Every parent faces challenges. While having young children is generally the most demanding stage physically, having teenagers is usually the most demanding stage emotionally.
With teenagers, we're often faced with a choice. Do we let them or don't we? Sometimes we get it wrong.
I remember one of those occasions. It was Barney's 17th birthday, and he'd just got his provisional driving licence. He asked me if he could drive to the train station 2 streets away for their journey to school. Wanting to give him a treat on his birthday, I readily agreed, and with Josh in the back, we set off with a sense of excitement. What I hadn't registered was that Barney didn't have a clue how to drive. He began by shooting backwards, narrowly missing 2 cars and a pedestrian. We then jolted forwards and kangaroo-hopped down the street in an alarming fashion. At this point, I suggested to Barney that he changed gear. To my horror, he took his eyes off the road completely and started to study the gear stick. I grabbed the steering wheel and the handbrake as we careered towards a line of smart and rather expensive-looking parked cars, and we ground to a juddering halt. As an ashen-faced Josh got out of the car, he muttered, "Not your best idea, Dad," and walked the rest of the way to the station.
We faced all the usual challenges: hair, bedrooms, major moods, times when communication was more difficult, wondering where they were late at night, trying to get them to take exams seriously, or less seriously in one case, and then suddenly they were 18 and leaving home.
We asked some parents what was best and worst about having teenagers.
I think the best thing about having teenagers is wherever they are, there's energy. You know, there's always chaos, there's always fun, there's always noise, and I really enjoy their company.
They've suddenly developed this mind of their own. You can't tell them to think what you want them to think anymore. They start to challenge your thinking, and they want to do what they want to do.
You can never say the right thing, you know, at times I just, you know, it's that kind of moment, time and time again. I find that quite difficult at times.
I just love that they're so funny and smart, and I think they're funnier than I was when I was growing up.
I really enjoy the fact that Lauren keeps us young, and she makes sure that we know what music is good and what things are trendy to wear, and that's really important. I like it. It's good fun.
Being lippy and answering back, for me, that just pushes a button.
We can actually have a sort of discussion on things intelligently, and there's always feedback coming from them, and it's an exchange of opinions as well.
As they grow up, you get occasions where you could really throttle them, but the love's always there. You try to advise them, hope they take your advice, but they've got to sort of learn on their own, and you've got to sort of step back and not interfere too much. But it's great.
I don't like things like worrying about where they are, and I guess the arguments. I think
teenage parties, alcohol, driving.
I love the sort of level of conversation, the deeper level of conversation I have, especially with our 16-year-old who has formed her own opinions now and doesn't just assume mum and dad know everything. She knows a lot now herself, and that's fun to hear her opinions on things.
You're in a phase where you're having to let go, give them some autonomy, let go of control, and that is hard.
They're individuals. They have their own ideas that they want to share. And it's, you know, unlike when they were younger. So it's more like friends
opening the fridge and there is nothing in it. So you think, you kind of plan something and you think, oh gosh, that's so nice, I'll have that when I get home, and it's gone.
The bedrooms, untidy, untidy, untidy. But they see that it's fine. They don't see a speck of dirt anywhere. So they just think it's great. They want to get up when they want to. Oh, it's frustrating.
It really is.
Yeah, it's the battle in our house with me.
Yeah, with him.
You know.
I just say, leave the bedrooms, Eric. Go past and shut the door.
Whatever you're going through, we hope that as you do this course and talk with other parents, you'll breathe a sigh of relief and say, well, at least I'm not alone.
We're going to be covering very practical topics, such as how we set appropriate boundaries, how we let them go gradually, how much freedom and responsibility we should give our teenagers, how we respond to their moods, and how we tackle the tougher issues like drugs, sex, money, and the internet.
We'll look at how to talk to our teenagers when it feels like they don't want to talk to us, and how we can keep on building our relationship with them.
The Parenting Teenagers Wheel is a visual summary of what we cover. In this session, Session 1, we'll be looking at how we can keep the end in mind amidst all the daily pressures and daily challenges.
Session 2 is about how we make sure our teenagers feel loved unconditionally.
Session 3 is about teaching them increasing responsibility as we gradually let out the boundaries.
In Session 4, we look at how we help our teenagers to handle their emotions in a healthy way, including handling their anger, and how this is a vital factor in forming strong relationships.
And then on Session 5, we'll look at helping them make good choices, particularly concerning all the big issues they're facing, through passing on information and values to equip them for life.
You'll see the rim of the wheel is about modelling values. This is a theme that runs throughout the course. Our children are like sponges. They absorb what we do. More than likely, they will copy us.
And then we've put love at the centre as the hub. That makes the wheel turn smoothly, because ultimately, parenting is all about loving our teenagers effectively.
The course is based on Christian principles for putting this love into action. But these principles are relevant to every parent, and you don't need to be a Christian to benefit from the course. We're going to start by focusing on 3 areas that help us in this new stage of parenting, or preparing to parent teenagers. The first area is the need to make adjustments.
Parenting teenagers is a time of transition. They're changing, and we need to change. We found we were on a huge learning curve. For some parents, there's a dramatic change from having generally open and communicative children to suddenly having children who come out with things like, well, you wouldn't understand even if I told you, or you treat me like I'm a 7-year-old, or you're so strict, everybody else's parents let them.
I remember the change from a cheery voice saying, "Hi, Mum," as they came in the door from school, to front door opened, door shut, sometimes rather hard, school bag flung down at the bottom of the stairs, a monosyllabic grunt, then feet going bang, bang, bang upstairs, into their room, and finally bedroom door shut, all over in 30 seconds flat. Well, as a mother, I'd feel alternating waves of hurt and incomprehension, and sometimes anger, at what I took as rejection. As a parent of teenagers, I had to change my approach. And most important of all was changing my communication style. I had to learn not to overreact, not to take their behaviour personally. And I hate to admit this, but sometimes I did treat them like 7-year-olds because it was easier. My default mode when worried was to try and control them. But I discovered teenagers need the freedom to work things out, to be listened to have discussions rather than to be dictated to. I had a lot to learn, and I had to learn it fast.
We asked some teenagers their views about their parents.
I think the best thing is that there's not, like, at home there's not such rules. They don't say, you've got to do this, this, this and this. We'll agree it beforehand. And so everything, like, what we do is we feel like we've kind of inputted in what's going on in the house and stuff. And so we always have, like, our opinions always asked, and it's kind of like, it's not just their rule over everything, it's kind of everyone's.
What I think my parents could improve on is when it's kind of like a jumping to conclusion thing, because say if my mum can't find a brush or something, she'll go, "Sarah, have you got my brush?" And most of the time Rihanna's got it. So I think she should ask first.
They would help me out if I ever needed it with money and just advice. This is what you should be doing, this is how you can sort of better yourself as a person. And they were definitely really supportive, but they let me still go out and have fun with my friends and still be a teenager, be a bit of a kid, but have responsibility. They kind of taught me that, which was really nice.
The best thing about my parents is that they don't really like get involved too much in like our arguments and stuff. Like they let us sort it out ourselves, and like if we do something wrong, they don't like punish us on the spot for it. They'll like do something like later on and say, oh well, you did this, so I'm going to do this.
Parenting teenagers isn't easy. There are times we need to say no, and they have the ability to make us feel as though we're being utterly cruel, totally unreasonable, and that we're doing them irreparable harm, while every other parent is kind, generous and reasonable.
I know for myself, trying to work out the balance between giving them enough freedom and putting in important boundaries was difficult, and I certainly didn't always get it right all the time. Far from it. One book that helped us a lot in the early years of having teenagers was by Ross Campbell with the title How to Really Love Your Teenager. I remember one day Ben saw the book lying on the kitchen counter and he said to me without pausing, "You ought to read a bit more of that, Dad."
Understanding that adolescence is a time of big transition helps us with the adjustments that we need to make in our parenting style. Adolescence is the stage of them growing from a child into an adult.
It's definitely been difficult. I've had, I was really insecure as a teenager growing up. In high school, in grade 10, it was really hard being with my friends and, feeling like I had to do this or do that.
Between the ages of 12 to 14, 15, I was trying to find my place, and it was, I suppose, I found that difficult at school, really.
When I was 16, 17, I went through a bit of a phase where I guess I didn't really listen to them as much as I used to. I sort of wanted to find, my own thing, kind of, I don't know.
It's, quite difficult because, once you move up into a teenager, you feel like everyone's expecting you to, be, an adult, when it's, quite a big jump from when you were before. So it's kind of hard just to adjust to that.
Teenagers, like caterpillars, are going through a process of transformation. The difference is that the teenager's transition is taking place in full view of others. There's no cocoon to hide them from sight. One of the major factors in all the changes is the impact of the rush of hormones.
We'd like to think of human beings as being rational and human beings' behavior being driven by thoughts and rules and things like that. In other words, the social factors should determine how our children behave. In fact, there's a whole landscape going on underneath. It's called hormones, and it's called brain development. And it happens at different ages with different children. It also happens differently when you compare boys with girls. And these chemicals are like rocket fuel. They do have a huge influence on the behavior of our children. Everything from emotional volatility to their sex drive, which many of us would rather not think about, but it's all true. So hormones have to be respected as a major factor in child development and behavior.
A sweet, enthusiastic child can turn into a difficult, argumentative and sometimes angry teenager overnight. That's normal. And if it's your experience, you're not alone. They will grow through this stage.
For many of us as parents, just knowing that helps us to go with it, to grow with them, to help them through this stage rather than holding our breath or giving up and just hoping for the best.
For the average girl, puberty starts at around 11 to 12 years old, but can be earlier. And for the average boy, from 12 to 14 years old, but again, can happen sooner.
The other area in which the brain is still developing has to do with reading emotions and understanding the emotional significance of things that are said. So when parents get really distressed, which they do, because it seems that their children don't care about the upset that they're causing, it's not because their children don't care, it's because their brains are not computing the fact that they are causing this distress to other people around them.
Today, children are growing up so quickly, and puberty is kicking in a lot earlier. 1 in 6 girls are starting puberty at the age of 8 compared to 1 in 100. 25 years ago, the boys have dropped down to 10. Now, when I say puberty, I mean just the basic simple changes before menstruation or before sort of the massive surge of puberty. But then you've got the mental changes, the physical changes, the sexual changes and the emotional changes. And it's vast. The whole body is reorganising itself. And for many teenagers, it's overwhelming. And for many parents, it's overwhelming. I use the analogy of a roller coaster. And many teenagers really identify with that. 1 minute you're up, next minute you're down. You don't quite understand what's happening to yourself and your body and your mind. Very, very, very confusing for everybody concerned.
But their brains grow and develop, and they do reach a point at which they suddenly appreciate all these things that they don't seem to appreciate in their early teenage years.
A lot of their behaviour during this stage can look like rebellion as they experiment, push for independence, voice their opinions, or become very self-oriented and do the opposite of whatever we want them to.
We used to think that the brain was fully developed by late childhood. We always knew there was a burst of brain activity around toddlerhood, but what they discovered was there's a similar burst of brain growth around puberty. But whereas around toddlerhood, the brain growth was to do with balance and movement, around puberty, it's to do with emotion and memory. If being around your teenage daughter is like sitting at the foot of an emotional volcano, you're not that far from the mark. If you've ever said to your teenager, you're behaving like a 2-year-old, again, you're not that far from the mark. But the last bit to develop is at the prefrontal cortex here, and it's the bit of the brain that psychologists call the brain's policeman. Some call it the brakes. It's the bit of brain that gives you sound judgment. That bit of the brain is still developing. So we say, how can you think of skateboarding off a 20-foot high wall? Why don't you put your seatbelt on? That bit of the brain is still growing. It's the bit of the brain, for example, that allows you to defer immediate gratification for the sake of longer-term good. We say, how can you think of going clubbing the night before your GCSE maths exam? Dad, the exam is not till tomorrow afternoon, for goodness sake. That bit of the brain is still developing. And that's why it's important to just get our teenagers through. Just hang in there with them. They are literally a work in progress. The scary thing is, one psychologist said, some teenagers don't get their breaks till they're 25 years old. And certainly that's true.
During this time of huge emotional and physical change, they need guidance and appropriate boundaries. And we'll look at how we do this in session 3. But they also need to know the security of our understanding and affirmation. They need our love and acceptance as they transition into becoming their own person.
Second, as well as understanding the changes they're going through, we also need to understand the pressures they're facing. One of the most obvious is the aggressive consumer society they're growing up in. Teenagers today are heavily targeted by advertisers as they present a lucrative market. And for some teenagers, having certain things really matters to them.
She wanted a touch screen, camera, all singing or dancing phone. We said, no, you're a young teenager, you don't need a phone like that. You just need a phone that sends and receives texts, takes photos, that's all you need. Oh, well, she went into overdrive. She'd seen this phone that she wanted, and that's the phone that she had to have, and the only way she could get it was on contract. So can you pick it up from there? What happened with this contract phone?
This conversation went on about, why won't you do it? I can't see why you won't do it. I'm not going to do it, Rhiannon. Why won't you? I'm not going to do it, Rhiannon.
You just want to be mean. You're just mean. You just don't want me to have a phone. And we would say, well, it's just not going to work. And what did you say to her? Oh, yeah, so, and how are you going to get this money each month? How are you going to pay it in? How are you going to do it? And she was like, you're going to pay it. Eric said, this conversation is over.
I said, June, tell her to leave me alone.
Yeah.
Tell her to stop, because I'm going to lose it.
I can tell when Eric's just about to blow.
They said no, and I threw a bit of a temper, and I was like, no, I want it now. But they, like, obviously, they knew what a ridiculous plan was it, but I'm quite stubborn, and I was really, really wanting this.
How it ended in the end is she was relating to a friend at school about needing a phone. This friend had a sister who wanted to get rid of a phone for, hey presto, just the amount of money she could afford.
So they definitely got it right, and at the time I was feeling really distressed, like they was just doing it to annoy me, but they wasn't. They were doing it because they saw the ridiculousness of the plan and I didn't.
Sometimes the difference between what they want and what we think is appropriate will not be easy to resolve.
Another pressure on our teenagers is the expectation to achieve. They're expected to do well at school, as well as facing the stress of taking increasing numbers of exams. Some of the pressure to achieve will be from us, their parents. We may not realise we're doing this, but our teenagers can think we have high expectations of them that they must fulfil.
But perhaps the biggest pressure of all is peer pressure, which is at its peak during the teenage years. All of us have a need to belong, to be part of a group, and that is particularly so for teenagers.
Usually the biggest pressure from their peer group is to conform, whether that's in the way they dress, the way they look, the way they speak, or the way they behave.
Teenagers are really intimidated. Like, they do what other people tell them to do. It's very easy for pressure to peer pressure.
I don't think I've ever met a single person that hasn't fallen to one example of peer pressure. So it's going to happen, and you just have to accept it. But the key is to not let it rule your life. You know, let other people, how other people see you and what they're doing, rule your personality and your actions.
I think if you set out early on that you don't want to be involved in things that are bad, like alcohol, smoking, that sort of stuff, then they won't try and make you do that. But also, it's a feeling that you might have, that you may feel that you have to do certain things in order to fit in when necessarily you don't, and your friends won't judge you on that. Like, if they're true friends, they won't leave you because you won't go to a party with them or something like that.
People saying, oh, well, you should straighten your hair because I've got quite curly hair. You should straighten your hair because we all wear ours straight. And I think, well, no, because I like it curly, actually, and other people like it like that as well because they come and play with it. And I think it's nice hair, a bit of bounce, you know, and I don't want to straighten my hair, and I don't have to. I still know who my friends are anyway, so I'm all good.
At 14, that's sort of the age when parents are embarrassing. You know, you're trying to be really cool at that age, and, you know, you want to fit in, and then, like, mum comes in, or actually the problem we've had is we've had a horrible car, and it's like they turn up in this old banger, and you're just like, my rep is going down.
When I was little, in 5th grade and stuff, I was under the intimidation, you know, I was intimidated by other people who were acting cool. You know, I went out and bought the same clothing these people wore, and I tried to look cool. And in the end, as I got older, I realized, you know, it doesn't matter what you wear, how you act, you're cool no matter what you are. So, I mean, I don't understand how there's people who why people think they're cool and people who think they're not cool. I mean, in reality, we're all cool.
Our children are under a lot of pressure, but so too are we. The demands of life today and our concerns for our teenagers can weigh heavily on us. We hope that being on this course will help you to realise these are normal feelings, common to all of us as parents.
One of the biggest pressures of parenting teenagers at the moment is drugs. I think that's a huge, huge issue, and I think as parents we often don't realise just how available they are. And, you know, drugs are everywhere for these kids, and it's so much a part of their culture.
Bringing up our children here is very different because they ask questions all the time. They question what you say to them. Back home, we just have to accept what our parents tell us to do. We never question, and it's very rude because if we were to question our parents, wow, you know, we'll be in big trouble.
Some teenagers will give us more to worry about than others, and we need to resist unhelpful comparisons with other families that make us feel we failed as parents.
A third way that will help us to adjust and handle the pressures is to keep remembering our long-term aim. Sometimes in our parenting, we can become so fixated on the issue of the moment, you know, the one that's particularly winding us up or worrying us this week, whether it's the amount of time spent on social networking sites or it's that they want a tattoo or a nose stud, that we forget the bigger picture. As a result, we can forget the importance of maintaining and building our relationship with them.
I want to enjoy them. You know, in a few years, they're going to be leaving home. I may never have this amount of time with them again.
And, you know, I remember someone saying that our favourite adult dinner guests are our children, and that's what my long-term aim would be.
Our hope is that this course will help you to parent in such a way that your teenagers feel good about themselves and that you feel good about your relationship with them. We want you to imagine that your son or daughter has just turned 18 and is leaving home and having to cope on their own for the first time. The big question is, are they ready?
I remember exactly that moment with each of our children, the most recent being Josh when he left school. There was so much going through my mind. I thought, have we equipped him with everything he needs for life? And I had a sort of flashback and thought, have we taught him what it means to be honest, kind, respectful of others, responsible, self-controlled, not least in the areas of alcohol, drugs and sex? Have we talked to him enough about how to build healthy relationships? Would he be able to manage on a practical level with cooking, doing his laundry and paying his bills?
When that moment arrives, the question for each of us is, are they sufficiently mature to face the challenges and make a valuable contribution to society?
We had to keep reminding ourselves of our priorities, which were helping our teenagers develop their character and learn good values, rather than only focusing on the tricky and emotional issue of the moment.
You know, sometimes as a parent, it's important we take a longer view. You know, when they're 15, the tick boxes are easy. We want their bedroom to be tidy, we want them not to smoke, we want them to do their homework. But that won't be enough for us when they're 35. If when they're 35, they don't smoke, their bedroom is tidy, and they get their reports in for their boss on time, but they're proud and arrogant and rude, and they have no care for those who have less than them, that won't be enough for us then. And fascinating thing is sometimes the teenage who's driving us crazy at 15 has some of those qualities. It is true that their bedroom's a mess, but they're wonderful friends, they're loyal people, they care about the disadvantaged. And sometimes we have to say to those kids, good job, well done, to keep those wonderful values, to have an eye not just on the child, but on the adult that we're moulding.
Sometimes it's only through the pressures they face and the choices they make that they have the opportunity to mature and to learn tough but important lessons and values.
We'd like you to turn in your manuals now and look at the questions, which we hope will help you to start thinking through your long-term aim as a parent.